Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Learning Live. My apologies on the technology end that we're a little bit late in starting, and we had to switch over and get started again. So here we are with Alexis, our colorista extraordinaire. I almost think that this line was named just for Alexis. So I'm going to let her take it away and talk to you about colored pencils. Away you go, Alexis.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Learning Live again. And as Sherry mentioned, I am doing the Colorista pencils. So they're actually a new product or a new product line by Spectrum Noir. So they're also the ones that started with the alcohol markers and now have branched out into quite a few products, actually. I believe Darlene is doing the alcohol markers soon or has done them.
She did the art markers, I think, a couple of weeks ago. And then in our Lawn Fawn PJ party, she did a really quick one on the watercolor markers, but we will also be revisiting watercolor markers in the future because there was lots and lots of interest in those.
Awesome. So these are blendable color pencil crayons. They come in 4 different packs. So you'll see I bought all 4. Floral sensation. So you've got a wide range of more of the petal color. So your pinks, your reds, your purples, your yellow and your orange sort of for the center of the flowers. They have a bright and vivid set, which is more of your rainbow color. So it gives you sort of, some in-betweens, but you have your main color palette with this one. So if you wanted to try one, I would suggest going with this because you can play a little bit more in different images with this set. They've also got, if you do a lot of people, they have a perfect portrait set. So a lot of your skin tones, your highlights, your lowlights, all of that, your blushes sort of colors. And then they also have a natural landscape. So this is your greens and browns, a little bit of blue, and some gray for some shading, which is really cool. So these pencil crayons are a wax-based pigment. So you can layer them. Tonight I'm also going to be using the Prismacolor colorless blender. So it comes in a 2-pack and it's $5.99. They're unsharpened, so you should have a good sharpener with you. I have one that I've had since high school that basically goes everywhere with me. It's a little stainless steel one. I think it's actually from Germany. These packs, each pack goes for about $5.49. So price point wise, it's a fantastic deal, to be quite honest. I mean, I almost told Sherry I was going to start the car and run out of the store when she told me the cost of them, because for the quality you get, the price is phenomenal. And again, there's 4 sets now. Who knows, they might come out with more. But this is definitely a good place to start. You're probably going to spend about $25 for all 4 sets, which is, again, a good deal.
Alexis, sorry if I can interrupt.
Yeah.
We did talk to our friends at Crafter's Companion, and the entire Colorista line, including the pencils, will be expanded in the future. So there definitely are more sets and more colors coming.
I figured as much because they are quite nice. I would definitely say, though, if you're going to start playing with these, I would also pick up the blenders because you will notice a difference in the way your color is layered if you use these. Another good tool to have is obviously a really good eraser. You can use that motorized one. Sorry, I do this, but you all know what I mean. But I like my white erasers. This is sort of what I stick to. Now for the images that I have stamped, I use just the Memento on Nina paper. I wanted to show you also on the craft Nina what it looked like. So I have, let me just see here. Okay, so this one here, I did a little bit of pre-blending so you guys can see, because I want to do sort of a set of blah, blah, blah. Do you all know it's Tuesday? My brain is fried, but that's okay. So this bottom part here is what I have used with the colorless blender, and I've used about 4 different pencil crayons in there. And what I like about using the colorless blender too with it is I used it and then I put more color on top. So I found it was really versatile in that it worked very well with the Spectrum Noir brand, even though it's Prismacolor, because sometimes, you know, some companies don't work so well together or they have some conflicting things, but I have found it's quite nice. But I wanted to show you sort of the two differences between using it and not using it. So I've got this one here that I've left blank, which, forgive me, I made a little oops on it. But I'm going to color it with the same 4 pencil crayons, and I'm going to show you what it looks like by just layering the color, not using the blender. Okay, so if there's any questions you guys have, let me know. I will just sort of put this up here so you can see the different color names. So starting from the top to the bottom, we have leafy green, woodland green, nettle green, foliage green, sap green, mossy green. We have a chestnut brown, a hawthorn brown, an oak tree, a dark timber, a flint gray, a sky blue, and that is in that natural landscape. So I know that this here kind of gives you an idea as to what colors are, but the back really does give you a better idea. Then for the portrait one, we have a platinum yellow, a rosy blush, a pink eggshell, a dusky taupe, peach hue, peachy hue, vanilla tint. You know, I'm going to make a couple of these. Amber glow, so I hope you're all laughing with me. Tawny brown, light auburn, natural brown, brown sepia, and dark umber. So again, they've got different hues in them, which is quite nice. All right. Oh, sorry. This was the bright and vivid one. So we have deep ruby, fiery red, orange citrus, yellow sunburst, fresh green, pine green, which I don't think... Yeah, I didn't think there was a repeat, which I don't think there is. So peacock green, wave blue, blue teal, azure blue, rich purple, intense pink. And that's the bright and vivid set. And then the floral sensation, we have a red tulip, a rose pink, a poppy red, azalea, marigold, primrose, hibiscus, pink lily, lotus flower, petunia, lavender, clematis. Now say that really fast. No, I'm just kidding. So what's nice is if you do get all 4 sets, you're not going to have a repeat on a pencil, which is great. So it gives you some very different tones in each of the different sets. So for this one, I used the blues from the Bright and Vivid set. So I'm just going to pop that out of here. And I will probably get a carrying case for all of them eventually. And this one, actually, I think I only used 3 colors for it. So I grabbed the 3 blues. Here we've got the wave blue, the blue teal, and the azure blue. They all look the same. They all come pre-sharpened. They've all got the little butts colored. And they've all got the names on here as well for you. Okay. Now, the only thing is, for example, on blue teal, the end doesn't really look like the actual pigment. So sometimes it is good to do like sort of a little swatch card too, so you know sort of what the colors are. So if we're looking at this, and I'm just going to do it on this one here because this is my messed up one. So we've got wave blue. Then we have blue teal, which looks like the next lightest color. Okay. And azure blue. And I do this with everything. I always do swatches, even when I'm coloring with my markers, just to make sure it's the color I want. So there's our sort of color based on the actual colors on the pencils. And I would actually say that that middle one is actually the darkest. So I would say that the blue teal is the darker of the 3. And that's what I would use for my shading part. So what I did with this one, so I'm going to put it here and here so you guys can see, is I start with my dark and I sort of edge in where my dark's going to be. And again, remember, you can layer this, which is nice. And there's nothing, I mean, too special about how I'm coloring. It's all about layering and taking your time.
This looks like it could be very relaxing.
Yes, very relaxing. That's why my tongue's tied.
You need some de-stress time.
That too. It's mainly because I want to take Monday and Tuesday off of work, so I'm running around like a crazy person to make sure everything's done before I go off. All the fun stuff. Okay, so then we go back in with our medium tone. Work that again. And if you've ever taken one of my Copic classes, this is basically the same idea. I just keep layering with the color.
So while you're coloring, Ellen does want to know what are the main differences from a coloring approach between alcohol markers and coloring pencils.
Don't make a mistake with pencils. I know it sounds absolutely horrible, but I find pencils are harder to fix a mistake, whereas with alcohol markers, you have that nice zero colorless blender that likes to scoop up the color. This doesn't. This colorless blender moves and spreads and evens out the color versus picking it up. Overall coloring approach, wouldn't say that it's different. I tend to work the same regardless of what medium I'm using, light to dark, dark to light. The only difference is I don't start with my light. So when I color with my alcohol markers, I'll start and edge out my darkest areas with my lightest marker and then start from my dark to light. That way. This way I just go in sort of with my darkest and start working with that. I hope that answers it, Ellen.
So ultimately, it just comes down to whether you prefer the look of a pencil crayon versus the look of a alcohol marker.
Exactly. And what medium you're comfortable working in. So for example, like here, if you're comfortable with seeing sort of the pencil marks, you've got, this is the exact same sort of vase. But on the top one, I used the colorless blender to mix the color, and on the bottom one I didn't. I don't know if you can see that in the video so much. I'm trying to.
Yeah, you can tell.
Okay.
Yeah, especially when you're like there when you got both of them together, you
Yeah.
can see the pencil marks a little bit more definitively on that bottom one.
That bottom one, yeah. So really that's the only difference. Yeah, it's the look and also the feel, because some people prefer the alcohol markers. Like I guess I find it a little bit smoother with the alcohol markers when I'm working with things. And it's a little easier to blend. But again, it's personal preference too.
So to continue with that, Ellen is asking, do you use a light hand with coloring pencils? She has a challenge that she finds that pencils tend to flatten the paper, and she feels like it stops blending at a certain point.
I haven't run into that, but I do find I put a lot more pressure when I am using the pencil crayons, regardless if they're my artist quality ones or these ones or Crayola. I find I still put a lot of pressure on them versus the marker, because there is that flow of a liquid versus a harder medium, which are these. Now these are wax based, so less pressure than say a Crayola, which is a very hard lead that is in the pencils. But these are much nicer. I say that they're sort of on the closer end to what I would say is an artist quality softness of the lead, versus a kid-friendly Crayola, $3.99, 6-pack, that the kids can like wail on, if that makes sense for you guys. Yeah. Sorry.
Maybe when you move on to using that blending pencil, that might show
show
our audience how much easier it is to blend with that tool.
Yeah. I will do her face so you can see it with the perfect portrait, and I'll use the blender on that on half the face versus the other half of the face. Sorry, what's second? Sorry, I just had to sneeze there for a sec.
Bless you.
Thank you. So this will show you better because I like the oh geez, see, these don't like me. It's also easier to get the markers out of the bag than it is the pencils out of the box. Okay. Skin tones. So this is the skin tone pack you're going to get. I find it's a little easier to see these on the craft, especially on a video like this versus the white. So I've got my colorless blender. I have sharpened her up. Now, the only thing with this is I found sometimes I have to sort of clean off the tip a little bit because when you're using it, sometimes some of the residue stays on here. So you might just have to clean it off a little bit. I do that with my markers too. Same thing. Okay. So if we're starting with a face tone, I'm probably going to go in with this one. I do it by feel pretty much.
This is worth watching would really help you as well, right?
Yes.
If especially if you did, a sample on white and a sample on craft to see what the colors, how they react.
Exactly. And what I'll do is I'll do like a couple of her dots blue with the same blue so you can see them. So right now I've picked Dusty Taupe and Peachy Hue to be sort of my colors for her face. So I'm going to concentrate on her forehead right now. And then show you the difference between using the colorless blender and then not using the colorless blender. So right now I'm just, and sorry guys, I move my image, not my hand. Again, if you've ever taken one of my classes, my hand stays in the same position basically the whole time. I'm not one that likes to move my hand all that much. Okay, and then I'm going to go in with my Peachy Hue. It's funny, I'm still coloring with these pencil crayons the same way I would with my markers, and I'm doing it in sections. Now, pencil crayons obviously don't dry out, or your work surface doesn't dry out or dry up to a certain extent. But when you're working with alcohol markers, if you're doing a large image, that is something that you have to sort of keep in the back of your mind. Like if you're doing something gigantic and you're coloring in tiny little areas, you might want to do it in sections versus the whole thing. Whereas with pencil crayons, that's one thing you don't have to necessarily worry about. I might actually throw a little darker color in there a little bit. Bring that brown out.
So Alexis, do you find that you can layer these much like your alcohol markers?
Yeah, and I find it's a lot easier to do it with these style versus like a Crayola, only because I find that the pigments in these are waxy enough, I guess, or have just the right amount of wax that you can layer it on top of each other. Like right now I'm going over the Peachy with the taupe to darken up those shadings because I want to bring that color in a little further. So it's allowing me to build the color layers on here, which is nice. Which again, it's works slightly different than the markers do. All right, I think I'm going to bring in just a little bit darker. Maybe this light auburn. Just so I can show you how it layers. So right now I'm just adding some darker shading where I had already gone over, just to really accent some of those areas. All right, So this is sort of the before. Sorry, just, with the pencil crayon. So that's before the blender. So you can still see a lot of lines that are on there. It's not blended at this point per se. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my colorless blender and I'm going to work from my cool area or my lighter area. And I'm going to work into my darker area. Now this does move the color and you will see that some of the color come off. But this is where you can always layer back with your pencils, which is nice. Again, you can go back over it and back over it and back over it. There's a perfect example. There is a difference. So when you use the zero blender on the markers and you take off color, sometimes it's hard to layer color back on top. Whereas with pencils, it's not. So I'm just going to sort of give me here. Okay, now I'm going back in with my colors. And I'm going to put another layer on here. And you'll find when you've done the first layer of colorless blender, it really does move the marker or the pencil, sorry, the markers. I'm so used to saying markers. It moves the color with the pencils a little bit differently when you go back in for another layer. And right now I'm working in circles versus straight lines once I've done the colorless blender, because I find that helps blend the color too with the colorless blender that I'm adding on. And I'm just building color back up. So I don't know if you can see the difference there. Oh, sorry, you guys can see my forehead. I'm a little delayed on my iPad.
That looks lovely.
Yeah, I find it made a huge difference when I was doing the blues on the difference that it looked. So let me do a couple of the dots with the blue as well. And I'll do, let me hear you. And I do like the craft. I find it's harder to get the vividness with the markers on the craft than you would have if you used pencil crayons on craft. I find you can get a brighter hue on craft with pencils. All right, so I'm just using the same colors I did for the vase on the white. And you'll already see, I already find that the color pops a little bit more on the craft with the pencils. All right, so I'm gonna lift this up so you guys can see it. And then I'm gonna do one or two of those with the colorless blender. So right now you'll see the difference in all of the colors, the different layers. I mean, hey, if you want, leave it like this. It looks awesome. But let me show you with the colors blender. I'm gonna do the top one. So I'm gonna clean this off a bit. Don't want any of that peach color. I'm gonna work from the light down to the dark. I'm gonna blend that. Okay, and then I'm gonna add just a little bit more in. Keep blending it. Okay. Now, I mean, I can see a little bit of a difference. But let me know what you guys think. I mean, I definitely notice it's much smoother in the transitions with the colorless blender.
Maybe pull it back a bit. It's having trouble focusing. There we go. That looks nice.
Yeah. I mean, there is a little difference, but it looks fantastic on the craft, to be honest.
Margaret was asking how different the skin tone colors would be on white versus on craft.
Yeah. I'll just do a little. I'll use the same colors, and I'll just do sort of like a. Oh, actually, I'll just do it upside down here. All right. So I'll use this one here. And then I went with this one here. So I'm just gonna. And then the lightest one. Oh, sorry, you guys seeing my head? Okay, so there is the sort of blended option with the skin tones. So let me just pull this one up here so you can see that. Okay.
So really just the craft gives a little bit less contrast.
I think the craft gives it more contrast, to be honest.
Oh, okay.
In my opinion, I find that the colors do pop, especially when you're doing like bright, vibrant colors. I find that it pops a little bit. I mean, I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. I like pencils more on craft is what I usually use them on. All right, now let me use the blender. And I also find you get a cleaner blend on the craft, which is weird, but all right, so that's without an extra layer of color. So see, it's even the edge of my pencil crayon here. It's picked up a lot of the color to start blending it. So it's going to take me more layers to get that same sort of finish that I got fairly quickly with the craft versus the white Nina. I guess maybe that's sort of what I meant, is that it's just, I do find it's slightly more vibrant. It picks up the color really nicely too. All right, so the one on the right is with the colorless blender and the one on the left is without. Versus this. So opposite. So this is the colorless blender, not colorless blender. I don't know. I think it, to me, just looks like it pops a little bit more on the craft. Thoughts?
Looks good both ways.
Yeah. Is there anything else you guys want to see? Any other color combinations or any questions about the mark or the, I was gonna say markers, sorry, the pencils?
What if you tried some of the pinks and purples on one of the flowers?
Yep, we can definitely do that. Now, I did stamp a vase on the craft, but you'll have to forgive me. It's missing some of the flowers. So I've got that one here, and then I've got...
I guess one question, Alexis, what kind of ink did you use to stamp with?
Memento. So the same thing I would use for my markers is what I used for the pencils. And again, same paper too, the Nina. All right, so this is the Floral Sensations set. So I'll just pick the mix of colors and we'll do a couple of flowers. I think I've got this. Did I stamp this in white? Well, maybe not. You might have to.
I think it's on the back side of the one where you did the, yeah.
It is. Thank you. Sorry. See, brain fried. It's only Tuesday. Okay, so I'm gonna do the big flower because they're a bit better so you guys can see them. So let's work with some pinks and purples. So I'm just gonna grab a couple here and sort of play with them. All right, so I grabbed a bunch of red. So I got poppy red, rose pink, lotus flower, and hibiscus. And again, I always do a little swatch to test it first. This also helps put me in the color order that I want to use them in. There we go. All right. So I just put them in the color order that I wanted to use them in by testing them on the paper. So again, we're going to start with our darkest, and I'm going to do it on both the white and the craft. And so I'm using the darkest one in the dark parts where I want my shading to be. This is sort of the center of the flower. Almost looks like a big W. And then I'm going to start with the next darkest one and working a little bit in where I have my other color and bringing it just slightly out further. Hey, Sherry, this is what we need to make, but next is adult coloring books.
That sounds like fun.
Yes. We could do it with all of the logos. That would be fun to color. Some scissors and hey, we can even do one of Matt's face.
Well, that would be something. The men of the crafting world. We can have Tim Holtz. We can have Matt. We can have Seth after.
There you go. All right, so because I used some reds and some pinks, my personal preference, it doesn't look good without the blender at this point right now. But I'm going to use the blender again on half of the, or you know what, I'm just going to use it on the whole petal so I can sort of just show you where it is. So right now you really have that one red, I think it is the poppy red that really sticks out versus the other pinksies. So I'm going to, my colorless blender, make sure it's all nice and cleaned off. Perfect. And I'm going to work from my light into my mediums and into my dark. And I'm just making little circles. I do blow on it to get the little bits that come off. If you use your hand, you're going to wipe them across the paper, and you don't want to do that. Or I guess if you have a very loose brush, you can brush it off too, but I'd still be very careful with that. Okay, so just gonna... Here. So there's a couple of the reds. Let me do some of the purples. So here I grabbed lavender, clematis, and petunia. And I think clematis will be our darkest color. And petunia, and then lavender, definitely. All right. So let's start with our darkest. And again, I'm just doing the same thing here. Okay, and this one I'm going to do a little differently because I'm going to go over where I was. I'm going to start layering that color. So basically I'm working in the previous color with little circles to help me blend those two together a little bit. Just because it's a slightly different color, this is another way to work with pencils, rather than having the blender. So that's going to work them two together, and it's going to allow you to layer it. But it's going to add more pinky tone to that dark purple that we had there. And then I'm going to go back with my dark color again, just to add a little bit more. Okay. Then I'm going to go in with my lightest and do the same thing in that sort of pinky middle tone. And I'm going to work with my light here. Okay. Funny, I find the flower colors do end up popping a bit more on the white than they do on the craft. But I find that the skin tone definitely pops on the craft. Okay, so there's a petal with the purple.
It's going to be a rainbow flower.
Yeah, it is. Once I'm finished with it. Actually, yeah, we can do orange too. Orange or some yellow. It has a little bit of... Oh no, there we go. Alright, so this is the floral set. This is sort of the next three groupings. Okay, so let me do this one here. So this one here is azalea. And we're going to use marigold. Again, I'm going to work in sort of a little bit in where I was, bringing it out. Extending that color. A little bit more dark one on here. Okay, with that marigold. And then in with the lightest, which is primrose? Primrose. Almost looks like the petals on fire. Actually, those look nice on both the white and the craft. So there's 6 markers from just one, or 9 pencils from just one package.
It just shows that these packs can go a really long way.
Yeah, definitely, which is quite nice because, well, even like I usually use 3s when coloring, sort of a light, a middle, and a dark. So this is definitely like it's got a good chunk of color in them. Let's take a look at the greens. Are we still good for time, Sherry?
Yep, we're good.
Okay. Oh,
maybe do a little bit of green and then we will wrap it up.
All right. Does anyone have any questions, or does anyone already have them?
Ellen says it reminds her when she was a kid and all she needed was paper and coloring pencils to stay entertained.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And now we need the whole game, which is not a bad thing. Okay, so you know what? Maybe let's just do the vase, because I've got the nice big vase here. So again, we got a nice good, actually I'll put them this way so you guys can see them a little bit better. I've got a good chunk of greens. So I'm just going to sort of pick sort of 3 that I like. So I'm going to go with these 3, and based on the actual tips, they look like they're in the right order. So I'm just going to, whoa, that looks really dark. I love it already. mean, I should have known it was going to be this dark. Definitely nice and smooth. Okay, I'm going to work with my medium. And I think depending on which colors you use, some of them will blend really nicely without the blender, and some you'll probably need the blender with. For example, these greens that I've picked here. I will most likely need the blender. And that's why I picked ones a little far apart from each other here, so we can see the difference. Really good for frogs or turtles. All right, just blow these. I'll lift them up and then I'll use the blender. So there's without the blender. So definitely some difference in colors that you have, and you can definitely see the different layers that I've done. Maybe not between the lightest and the medium, but definitely with the dark. So what I'm going to use is a color blender, and I'm going to try and get that dark to blend a little bit better with sort of the medium into the light. Let's go into the light, people. All right, so little circles to help get you that blending. And it's already starting to blend that really nice. I think I will have to do another layer though. Okay, so that middle tone. And a little bit more of the dark. Okay, now you'll see when I lift this. Oh, I just lost half of them. I was going to show you the shavings, but there. So that looks a little bit better with the blending versus that.
So just like anything, this needs a little bit of practice and figuring things out.
And playing. A lot of playing. Who doesn't like?
A lot of playing.
Yeah. Here. Is there any other color combinations? I don't know if the brown will be so easily between the two.
Well, I think we need to let them have something to practice and play with. So,
for sure.
Right. Well, thank you so much tonight, Alexis. And it must be fun to play with something a little bit different. And we thank you for taking on that challenge.
Well, thank you for having me tonight, guys. It was definitely.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say it was definitely fun. It definitely did bring back a lot of color theory.
All right, everyone, if you think of any other questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. And even if you just start with one pack and start playing with them, I think you'll fall in love with these just like Alexis has. Good night, everyone.